Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Executive Director Kathleen Thompson.
And I'm Advocacy Associate Tatum Owens, joining from San Antonio today. We're covering the mayoral and city council elections in San Antonio, one of the highest profile topics in Texas politics outside of the goings-on at the Capitol and one of Texas's most dynamic and important metros. A military hub, a tourism spot, and as well known for its important history, the city is growing fast, and the future of San Antonio is central to its next choice of leadership: representative change in the Lone Star State overall. Gina Ortiz Jones is a well-known name among followers of Texas politics, herself of a renowned military background, having served as a U.S. intelligence officer during the Iraq War, and later as Undersecretary of the U.S. Air Force, the first woman of color and the first member of the LGBTQ+ community to hold that post. She grew up in San Antonio and is one of the several candidates running to become the next mayor of her beloved and mine hometown. We're glad to have Gina Ortiz Jones back on the pod. Welcome.
Hi, great. Thank you all for having me on today. Just one small correction. So the first out lesbian, we actually had, there was a member of the LGBTQ community who served previously as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, but the first out lesbian across any of the military departments, and I'm very proud of that.
Thanks for that note. We'll note that many of our listeners are located outside of the Alamo City, from the Permian Basin to the Gulf Coast. Most Texans remember the Alamo, or they want to, or they visited the Riverwalk.
Or they watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right? Where they also know the Alamo from.
They've looked for a bike. What else would you share with our audience about this city as someone who has maybe only been there as a tourist? Maybe they've missed something about the true character of your hometown. Will you tell us about San Antonio and about how growing up there shaped you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, San Antonio is the second largest city in the state, right? And we like to say kind of how big we are in relation to others in the state. But I think it's also really important, as we're thinking about where we as Democrats can have an impact, this mayoral race. I mean, there are more people that live in San Antonio than in 10 states. Right. So the ability to serve a lot of people well, most importantly, cannot be underestimated in this race. So I'm very proud of, having been raised here in San Antonio. I went to Adams Hill Elementary School, Pease Middle School, John Jay High School. That's always the San Antonio question, right? Where'd you go to high school? But in light of those, though, I think it's also not now. In these times, it's not just kind of like the name, but also I proudly say, look, all of those schools were Title I schools, right? So when we think about what is happening in our state, both when you talk about the voucher scam, but also, attempts in DC to defund public education, I know why those are important and why certainly they're important in our community. Yes, we are a wonderful community. I think we can frankly do better, which is why I'm running for mayor, right? Second largest city in the state. We are the most economically segregated big city. We have the highest rate of poverty of the top 25 cities in the country. So again, we've got some great strengths. We are Military City USA. But again, when I talk about some of these other stats, in particular, one that kind of jumps out at me is the fact that over half of the kids in our community, grades 3 through 8, are not reading at level. Their math skills are not at level, right? I can't help but think of some of these things in that context. Again, it was public education that allowed me a path, right? Allowed me to grow up healthy, get an education, and serve our country. And also really the unique way in which San Antonio contributes to our national security. So fun fact, right? The number one reason why somebody will serve in the military is if they know somebody who serves. And so in our community, where 11% of our population are veterans, 5% are active duty, that's a really high percentage compared to other communities in the state and even in the country. And so our community disproportionately sends people to serve, which is why if we don't have our stuff straight, right, if we're not raising enough healthy kids and academically prepared kids, it is actually a national security issue. So I can't help but think about, again, the future of my community, not only in terms of the challenges that we are facing now, but also the opportunities that we've got, right? We have some real exciting developments on the horizon, but we've got to make sure that people are getting cut in and people are getting a fair shot and that we address some of these long-term inequities. But we can't just hope that they will fix themselves, right? We've got to have a strong leader. San Antonio certainly has the talent. We have the resources, and I look forward to bringing the leadership to make sure we move in the right direction.
100%. And thank you for touching on the importance of public schools in San Antonio. I myself am a product of San Antonio public schools. And across the board, even in some of the wealthiest districts in San Antonio, like Northeast, they're having school closures.
That's right.
We have Lackland ISD, which is like a military base here in San Antonio, has its own school district. So it's all tied together. Our next question for you also relates to what you've already addressed, is San Antonio's presence nationally being the seventh most populous city in the US. Being the mayor of one of Texas's major cities is a very high profile job, one that often comes with a statewide and even national profile. Would you please give us your overview of what issues aren't just local to this city, how you will meet those issues on a statewide and national stage, and why you feel called to serve as its next mayor?
Well, let me start off a little bit with kind of my personal story, which is why I think regardless of, what office you are seeking, you've got to be really strong in your why, right? I am a proud first generation American. My mom came to this country over 40 years ago. My mom graduated from the #1 university in the Philippines, but she wanted a shot at the American dream. And the shot presented itself, and it was to come to our very special country as a domestic helper. And she humbled herself because she knew that even if she came to this country in that capacity, if she was willing to work hard, the sky's the limit. Right. And she just reminded my sister and I every single day that we were lucky, not smart. We were lucky to have been born in this very special country. We would have to give back. Right. It's why I served. It's why my sister serves in the Navy to this day. And I think that's a really important kind of frame of reference. One, I know how lucky I am. I know, again, I was willing to work hard and study hard. But again, the opportunities in our country are very, very special. And a lot of those are protected and created at the local level. Right. So that's why I would look forward to expanding those, creating those, protecting those for the folks, frankly, that are just as talented, just as hungry as I was as a young person, and are willing to work hard and really deserve that shot. We are also, I think, well, I will say one more thing, right? As critical to kind of how I lead is again, knowing how fortunate we are, but also I had the experience myself of serving under a leader in an organization where, leaders could not be as committed to my success as they were others, because it was literally the policy at the time. And I'm speaking about don't ask, don't tell, right? I'll never forget. It was my mom raised my sister and I by herself. And so when the Air Force said, hey, we'll pay for your education, I took that ROTC scholarship and I went to Boston University. But I will never forget, one of the very first things I had to do at Boston University, even before my first class, was sign a piece of paper that said, I will not engage in homosexual behavior, because that don't ask, don't tell was the policy at the time. And it applied to me even as a cadet. And I knew what that meant, right? I knew that my opportunity to get an education, my opportunity to serve our country, my opportunity to die for our country if need be, all that goes away, just because at the time we did not have enough leaders with the courage to say anybody ready and willing to serve their country should have the opportunity to do so. So certainly I carried that forward when I had the honor to serve as the Undersecretary of the Air Force and the #2 over the Air Force and the Space Force and lead our men and women. But that has always also helped me understand that if you are leading the conversation, make sure you're always questioning, who am I not hearing from? Right? And why am I not hearing from them? Because again, don't ask, don't tell, that was the policy. That's why you weren't hearing from them. But I think as a leader, you have to consider the ways in which your decisions are affecting people who you might not be hearing from. Right. And certainly in our community, as I just mentioned, we are so economically segregated. I mean, in this upcoming municipal election, if we hit 15% turnout, that will be good. Right. And so I think part of this is really giving people an understanding of what you want to accomplish, the life that you have lived that shows the values that you're committed to, and then what you would do with that, with the honor to serve, and what that would look like for them in their everyday. Right. And so what do I hear a lot about in our community? I hear a lot about, look, things are changing very quickly, right? I will say, I was just at several, protests as of late, everything. And some of these hit San Antonio uniquely because, again, we are a military city, USA. Just a couple of days ago, I was proud to stand with the Ukrainian community here in San Antonio after that embarrassing meeting between our president and President Zelensky. I remember I was at the Pentagon when Russia invaded Ukraine. And the assessment was this is going to be over shortly, right? Because Ukraine does not have the resources to go up against, Russia and what was assessed to be their capabilities at the time. And now 3 years later, right, to look at where they are now, certainly that has been because of American help, but the Ukrainians have also understood what it means to, and shown the rest of us what it means to fight for a democracy, what it means to fight for their country and not give up, right? And frankly, push forward and be relentless and be innovative and fight for what's right. Right. And so proud to stand with that community. Just a couple of days ago, we were proud to stand with those that are rightly very concerned with the ways in which those in power in government now, frankly, are abusing that power. Right. Being very disrespectful to federal workers that do nothing but, frankly, keep our country moving forward. Right. Paying those Social Security checks, making sure the VA runs, making sure that our parks and services are running, like all the things that people are like that rely on every day that just don't think about because it works. With laying off thousands of people at the VA, look, that affected me personally as a female veteran. If there's a female veteran watching this, if you get your care at the VA, it is already hard to get an appointment. Right. That's one. And so I tried to schedule an appointment myself with one of my caregivers. And it what was traditionally 6 weeks, which is long, I would argue, now went to like 2-3 months. Right. It was just ridiculous. And the other challenge with that, though, is that when you take away those VA services, those folks get farmed out onto the community, which means that you are taking up spots in the community that the rest of the community is also looking, right? So these things trickle down, even if you're not specifically a VA recipient or you yourself getting a Social Security check. Less people that are less economically secure and being poorly served in our community affects our entire economy, affects our entire community. So those are, I share all that because these are things that are happening like right now, right? And I don't think, and with these tariffs that are expected, the San Antonio region is the 21st largest manufacturing exporting region in the entire country, right? The tundras that are built on the south side, all the other manufacturing jobs that are on the south side is a real significant engine for us. 5% of our workforce in San Antonio is in manufacturing. So our ability to export things is critical to our local economy, which is why it's so important then that we are highlighting the ways in which all of these things together, attacking public education, attacking our veterans, attacking our economy, how this does not bode well for us in the long term, right? So you just got to be cognizant of all those things. I think, though, what's also really important is people want a leader. People want a plan. People are like, okay, what can we do for ourselves? How do we get through this, right? Which is why in looking at and speaking with my neighbors, I put forward, hey, these are my 6 priorities. These are the 14 action items that I would want us to tackle in the first 100 days. Right. And again, not word salad, but no kidding. 100 days. These are the things. These are the questions that we're going to answer and have some data on so that we can be well informed as we approach these things. Right. Because again, even if Kamala was our president, we would still have that fact that, again, over half the kids in our community through grades 3 through 8 are not reading at level. Their math skills are not at level. We'd still have 95,000 families that are housing insecure. We'd still have 67,000 folks on that wait list for affordable housing. Right. So like all these things would still be challenges in our community. So how do we begin to address those? So folks can go to the website, but I'm happy to rattle off just a couple of them, right?
Yeah, please.
Housing affordability in a number of ways comes up, right? Everything from, hey, I'm a bartender. I can't find anything to rent in the community that I work in. So I have to drive 30, 35 miles, right, to the outskirts to find something to rent that I would, and frankly, that I would want to live in, right? Folks that have been in their homes it's a family home. It's been in the family for decades, getting priced out, right, because of property taxes. And then, yes, just not nearly enough affordable housing in our community. Challenges. Again, one of my earliest memories is sharing a queen size bed with my mom, my sister, and my grandmother, because at the time we were renting a room. right? Like, so I know the importance of affordable housing and like what that enables for everything else, right? And so one of the things I want to do is look at how might we go faster on these things that people are telling us they need, right? So in the first 100 days, I would want to look at, hey, how fast can we go on a kind of on certain kinds of projects, right? In particular, projects that are 70 to 100% affordable, that co-locate childcare, and that help us meet our transit-oriented objectives, right? Like, we don't have to be so siloed in our approach on these things. We can look at these things at the same time, right? Try to achieve some of these objectives at the same time. So what that does is like, hey, y'all, we've heard you. Affordable housing, we got it. We've heard you on childcare. We've heard you on public transportation, right? So, but also what it does, I think, is very clearly send a signal to those developers and say, hey, FYI, these are the things that we are looking for in our community. And if you meet these objectives, we're going to try to go faster on these things, right? We also know that it is really important, as I talked earlier about these longstanding inequities in our community, that we address it. We try to address the root as best we can, right? We can't fix public education, but we do have a say in the quality of young people that enter, right, and how ready they are to learn. So San Antonio, we've got a great program. It was started under a previous mayor. It's called Pre-K for SA. It only serves a fraction of our kids, though. Right. And so what I would want to do in that first 100 days is, hey, y'all, show me what is the full number of kids? How much, truly, how we need to be thinking about it is, how much talent are we leaving on the table as a result of of not serving every kid in this community that is eligible for Pre-K for SA? So what's the number, right? And if we as a community wanted to pay that bill, what's the bill? So as we're looking at all these other infrastructure-related investments, we can also look at what that investment might look like, and where that we can have a conversation about where do we think the highest ROI is on these things. And I say that because, ROI, I think, is a really important piece here. We don't have endless resources, right? We also don't have endless time. So if there's lots of data that shows where we have the highest rate of return on our investments in our people, and it says as far left as possible, then we need to make those investments. Right. But that's for the community to decide. But we have to start with the data. There's another piece of data, though, that we should be looking at. In general, we should be looking at how well our investments are working. Right. Ready to Work is a program here in San Antonio. Started during COVID. And I think is an excellent example of where San Antonio's heart is always in the right place. Our execution, though, sometimes can be improved. I'll just say, right. It's always execution. And now we have some data to look at that helps us see, okay, this is where it's working well. This is where it's not working well. And 75% of the folks that have gone through that program, only 25% of the folks after 12 months are still not in an approved job. Right. And so that's to me is a big gap. And we need to be putting people, I think we need to be training people to need. Right. If we were, you wouldn't have such a big gap in folks that were still looking for an approved job, looking to be placed in an approved job almost a year afterwards. Because again, I grew up on the far west side of San Antonio, and I know the communities that would be really, frankly, itching to get into a program like that if it was working well. Right. On top, we just visited actually a place that is a Ready to Work partner. It's the College of Health Professionals here, and what they do is they train people for medical in medical areas, right? So I mean, they're not nurses, but they are medical professionals. So these are going to be your medical technician, your medical assistants, your dental techs, right? Even those that are working in kind of the billing and on the admin side, and they are a Ready to Work partner. And in asking about that with the leadership there, that program is essentially free to the individual. In part, though, it relies on the $7,200 Pell Grant from the Department of Education, right? So that is a really critical. That's a really critical program. In particular, that they're the pipeline into the medical field, because of in part of the people that they are producing, that the professionals that they're producing, but also in terms of the population that they are serving. The average student there is a 26-year-old Latina who is a single mother, right? She tried community college, it didn't work. But now we've got to put these folks on a path to where they have a career, right? Not just a job, but a career. And so for the Department of Education to go away and to potentially, take those Pell Grants away, that not only immediately impacts that individual and her family, but that also impacts the amount of medical talent we have in in our community, and we're already so medically underserved for a number of reasons, right? So housing affordability, strategic investments. And I would say, as Tatum, you're here in San Antonio, there's lots of discussion about what could potentially happen downtown, right? This is the folks are, and Kathleen, and for others that might not be super familiar, but there's some discussion about major investments downtown in our tourism related, right? So related to the convention and the Alamo Dome and a new arena for the Spurs, almost publicly financed is currently the discussion, and almost to the tune of $3 billion, right? So this is not an insignificant investment in our community. As I've talked to lots of folks on this, though, I've been to lots of neighborhood associations. People want to make sure we get a good deal. And that's because, look, people remember, we publicly financed the Alamo Dome. We were supposed to get the mayor at the time, Mayor Cisneros, told us that we were going to get an NFL team, I think, as people have shared with me. The Brahmas are cool. I'm with you, Tatum, but that ain't an NFL team, right? That's one. And the county judge, Nelson Wolf, who negotiated the deal for the AT&T Center where the Spurs currently play, he recently shared on a podcast that the deal there was that as a result of us publicly financing that, the Spurs were supposed to give us 20% of their profit every year. And on that podcast, he shared that over 20 years, our community has gotten zero, right? Now, look, I would argue it would have been nice to know that in any of years we were getting shorted, by the way, but thanks for letting us know now. And that's why it's just important that we get a good deal. We've got to ask these questions. And that's why on my 100-day plan, it's important that we are understanding how we got to where we are. And as the press has described, the use of non-disclosure agreements by city staff as they are engaging with the developers and whatnot, that's how we got to that's how we got to where we are, right? These discussions for much further along than I think people realized. But it was San Antonio Express News that requested that information, and all that finally came out. And I think some of the city council folks were very surprised at that. It sounded like they were learning about some of these things at the same time that we were. I think, though, it's really, look, I worked in the intelligence community. I know there is a way in which you protect information, but also make sure that the decision makers have the information when they need to make decisions. And in this case, that is taxpayers, right? Look, taxpayers cannot be last to know and first to pay. That is not how this should work. And again, as they look at all these promises made, but promises not kept, right? We kept our part, we paid the thing. And so that's why I think it's really, that's why you're seeing some real hesitation in it, as the recent poll has shown. Again, there could be a deal, right? We just got to make sure it makes the most sense for as many folks in San Antonio, not just a select few.
Gina, I'm gonna jump in and take a larger view for folks who are not familiar with what you're talking about. If you're in DFW, this is Jerry World. If you're in Houston, this is what's happened with taxpayer-supported Astrodome.
Yeah.
For San Antonio, what Gina's talking about, now there's a proposed multi-billion-dollar sports and entertainment district that would be planned for a new Spurs arena called Project Marvel. And is not universally popular in San Antonio. Gina, you're talking about a poll that just showed that 41% of supporters support it, 31 oppose, and then the rest don't have an opinion. But what you're saying is its support is how it's going to be paid for. Could you talk a little bit more, going back to what you're saying about Project Marvel and about not putting the money up first and asking questions later?
Yeah, look, this is a generational investment. Right, a generational investment. And so because it's not only, again, about the investment today, but I think rightly voters are pointing out, again, the broken promises. We didn't get an NFL football team when we paid for the Alamo Dome. We did not get East Side development around the AT&T Center, right? On top of, we did not get the 20% that the judge at the time negotiated. Right. So there's lots more context here. However, as I go and talk to neighborhood associations and I talk to voters, I still don't have drainage in my neighborhood. right? Like there's also, unfortunately, we've got a lot of construction already. And so when people are living through these like endless construction projects, it really doesn't instill a lot of confidence that this major investment will be done, within cost, on time. And oh, by the way, that the promises made are going to be kept, because that unfortunately has not been the history, right? So this is a really significant investment, and I'm glad that folks are paying attention and asking the questions, as in, yeah, like what's in it for me? Because that can't just be for tourists, right? That has got to be like people on the south side and the east side, like people, San Antonians have to be able to afford a ticket and enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
If other people want to come in and enjoy it too, cool. But I want to make sure San Antonio gets a good deal. And look, voters, as they've raised with me, they're concerned. They're like, is this? We all love Wemby. We're very thankful he's here. We're a little bit concerned he's not doing well. But look, if people are looking at the Luka trade and hey, if we're building all this for our superstar, like he's going to stay, right? And oh, by the way, people also know that the with seeing the Spurs play in Austin, they're like, okay, is Austin going to help us pay for this? Because why are we paying for the whole bill if these folks are going to go play in Austin? So these are real simple questions that our community has about such a major investment, and they're right to do so.
San Antonio friends, join us in the Alamo City on Tuesday, May 6th for the first time since 2017 for a live podcast taping and fun get-together with like-minded progressives. You'll have a chance to visit with office holders, candidates, and activists, grab a beverage, share stories, and celebrate progress in Texas, which doesn't happen without you. During our Party for Progress and live podcast recording, come meet people doing good work to push progress forward in Texas. You can sponsor the event and this podcast and RSVP early using the link in our show notes. Hope to see you in San Antonio on Tuesday, May 6th.
One of your main priorities for San Antonio, as you've mentioned, is affordable housing. And just like every other big city in Texas and largely across the country, San Antonio faces challenges in regard to homelessness. District 8 Councilman Manny Pelaez, who's also running for mayor, has recently funded public banners advising residents not to give money to panhandlers, but to donate to local nonprofits instead, which has drawn both appreciation for its attempt to curb aggressive panhandling, but also questions about the effectiveness and ethics of this effort. For you, would you please give us your view of the homelessness challenges facing San Antonio currently and what you think is the best course of action?
Well, look, the homelessness challenge has come up in a number of ways, and it's real. I mean, I have seen it even in the part of town that I grew up in, and did not. You didn't normally see that, but that highway is now a little bit wider, and now has offered more cover for folks. But you have seen it, and it's something that we need to address. You actually even see it. We pay for it in a number of ways, both in terms of the clearing that needs to take place, but also downtown. Right, it affects our ability to for people to feel safe downtown, as well as for our ability to address that. Right, and so I think we've got to tackle this in a number of ways. One, I think we have to get as far left to it as possible. How can we help prevent homelessness? And I think you do that by, again, investing in people as far left as possible, right? We know, again, pre-K for SA increases, rates of high school graduation, of healthcare outcomes. So it's good for the individual, it's good for the family, it's good for the community. So again, setting people up for success as early as possible, I think, is really important. I sat down a couple of weeks ago with Opportunity Home, and Opportunity Home here in San Antonio runs our affordable housing program, not only the units themselves, but also the voucher program. Then that's important because, again, if we want to get people off the street, oftentimes it'll be with the help of through the housing that is offered through them, right? That is overseen by them. And so they had a goal of, hey, we really want people to be self-sustaining within 5 years, right? That's their goal, to get people through there. And that's important to know because as quickly as we can free up spaces there, is we can help people get off the street and maybe a little bit of help there, and then ultimately on their own path to be self-sustaining. And so that was an important conversation for me to understand. One, because the money for affordable housing, the housing units and the vouchers, that's all federal, right? But all the services that would help somebody become self-sustaining, those are local resources, right? And so I asked them, I was like, well, let's look at the data. How long does it actually take for somebody to be self-sustaining? Is it 5 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 8 years? Like what's the number? How well are we meeting that target? But then two, help us as a community understand, how can we go faster? Are folks having a hard time becoming self-sustaining because they're having a hard time finding a job because they don't have a GED? Like, we can do something about that, right? We can potentially be helpful there. If you're going to do ready to work, you might as well do, there's another kind of ready to work, which is like get your GED, right? There might be the ROI on that might be high. Are you telling me that, folks are having a hard time getting to their work because they don't have childcare, right? They don't have a car, so public transportation. So all of these things that we as a city are already focused on, we can be helpful and very targeted in addressing, again, and getting people self-sustaining, but we've got to look at the data, right? I think the three most important questions that a leader asks are why not, and where's the data, right? Where is the data? So we can really make smart, strategic investments, and certainly as it relates to helping people be self-sustaining, so we can help less people be homeless. But some of these other things, I mean, again, really get at it starts at the foundational things that really helps people be as economically secure as they can be as early as possible. This also came up, actually, homelessness, in the context of something that we have to address if we want more people to take public transportation. Right. This was there was a young woman that shared with me. She's like, I would take it. One, I needed to run more frequently. Fair. She's like, two, but I also see some folks on there that look like they might be homeless. And so it doesn't make for a good experience. And we want people to take public transportation. And so addressing the homelessness issue it can, I think, also ensure that we're rightly addressing all these other things at the same time as best we can.
Gina, you talked a little bit earlier about personal civil rights, and I'd like to go back to that briefly. Advocates for reproductive rights and justice across our state have celebrated San Antonio's municipal leadership's support of our reproductive rights. The council is considering creating a fund to assist women seeking out-of-state abortions. This has caused some debate, especially in light of potential legal challenges and a new proposed bill filed by Republican State Senator Donna Campbell of New Braunfels up the highway there, which really laughs in the face of local control that aims to ban such funding by Texas cities. Will you talk to us about your view on whether San Antonio should press forward on abortion travel funds and about local control?
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting. I want to think about, and I talked to folks about this in the context of the investments we're making. Folks are like, and I certainly want us to grow as fast as we can in a very strategic way. But the ways in which the federal government, and certainly Austin, the ways in which they are attacking reproductive rights, and in fact stifles our ability to be strong economically. Right. In our state, you all know this. Since 2022, we saw the first increase in teenage pregnancy in our state in 15 years. Right. And when I talk, if you were to look at a map of where in our community, and our community is quite segregated, if you were to look at a map in our community of where those kids are not reading at level, but then you also overlap that with where you're seeing teenage pregnancy rates increase, it's the same communities. Right. It's young Latinas in our community that is driving that number up. On top of the fact that you also know this, right? We're seeing the double in percentage of sepsis seen in our communities. On top of the fact that these laws are making it so that medical professionals, in particular OBGYNs, don't want to come here. They don't want to practice here. They don't want to train here because they are so fearful of not being able to provide the healthcare that they have been trained to provide. And so, look, we can only grow as quickly and as safely as we have the medical professionals to serve our entire community. So that is first and foremost how I see this, right? People should have access to the healthcare that they need in our community. When it is not available in our community, we should help them get it. Okay. This to me is a very basic thing. And as you know, we had a conversation in our state, these draconian laws, rape and incest, abortions being outlawed when that is the case. I think we have to help people. The abortion fund here, the suggestion is $100,000 for a travel fund. Our budget is about $4 billion, right? So if you wanted to, very simply, that's like if somebody had $4,000 and I asked them for $1, right? I think we can spare $1, especially when you look at and this is an important point. Thank you for asking it, because there are some Democrats running in this race that are a no on that travel fund, but a yes on that blank check to these developers for those projects downtown. Right. I mean, that is where you really have to ask yourself, who are you accountable to, and who are you interested in helping? But we need to make sure people have the healthcare that they need, and certainly the most vulnerable, like our rape and incest victims in our community. Right. People should ask this question of the other Democrats running for mayor in this race, to be put a very fine point on it. Right. Those folks calling themselves a progressive, you ask them where they are on this issue.
100%. Healthcare and abortion rights should be at the forefront, especially coming from Texas. So thank you for sharing that. Other things that are central to San Antonio, obviously, we've already touched on affordable housing. We're going to come back to that in a second. And that is intrinsically tied to the state of the economy here in San Antonio. The U.S. Census showed that compared to any other large city in the country, San Antonio's population has increased most, gaining 22,000 residents. We all know this. We've been in a state of growth for I don't even know how long. San Antonio's population is feeling the pressure too. Folks are feeling the pressure too, with favorite restaurants and small businesses closing and rents rising as more people relocate to the 210. Luckily, they have options, as San Antonio also leads the nation in small business support, with greater access to affordable capital than anywhere else. However, as you've noted, studies are showing that despite economic growth, residents are not feeling the effects, and San Antonio has some of the most socially stratified and poorest residents of a large city. If you were elected mayor, how would you create more housing options and make living in San Antonio more affordable?
The housing piece is so critical, and it's critical. There was a recent negotiation between a local school district in our urban core, San Antonio ISD, and a developer. And they really needed this key parcel of land. And the school district negotiated, and they said, and one of the things on the negotiation list was help investing in affordable housing. This is a school district, and they say, look, this is, if they have experienced having to shut down schools, right? Schools are shuttering. Yes, there is the impact of charter schools, but there's also the fact that people are getting priced out of these communities, right? So it's not only you need more affordable housing for families to be in these communities, so they don't get hollowed out and schools close. You also need more affordable housing for the teachers themselves, right? This is already a very difficult career field for folks. So helping teachers in particular, but also I would argue helping the range of folks that help keep our city moving and who we need to help because we need more of it in our community. Our nurses, right? Our mental health professionals, our childcare workers, certainly our firefighters and our police as well. That's why one of the things that I want to do in that first 100 days is look at how we might expand the good proposal put forward by the District 2 councilman that helps our teachers buy a home. But I think expanding that to that population that I just described, right? I think that's really important. I think it's also really important that we take a look at the role of private equity and how they have, frankly, this is not a San Antonio unique phenomenon. You're seeing this across the country. You're seeing a lot of it in this Southwest as well. Which is the way in which private equity has come in and bought those homes, let's just say $250K and below, bought those up. And so those homes that would traditionally have been that first home that somebody buys, right, where they start to build equity, they're not available because they're not for sale. They are for rent though, right? And if you've got, as you all know, if you've got a high enough percentage of the supply, you're going to be able to keep that number higher than maybe what it should be. So I think, again, and this is not to demonize anybody, but again, let's start with the data, because what other communities have found is when they looked at the data and they saw the amount of housing supply at a certain level controlled by outside entities that don't live in our community, right? But we're constraining the growth of our community. What they have done is introduce pro-competitive policies that said, yep, okay, we're capping you at this level, you and your subsidiaries at this level, because of the real economic impact, not only today, but on the future. We need people, if we want to address generational poverty in our community, we have to help people build equity, right? And so first 100 days, I want to understand, okay, what is the percentage that is owned by private equity, right? And now we can start having a conversation about what we think the appropriate pro-competitive policies might be to ensure we understand what it means, but also what it could mean if we wanted to take a different route. it's critical, right? And I think also as we are looking at public transportation, right, as we're looking at a number of ways in which our community is growing, as you point out very quickly, sprawl though isn't growth, right? We can be much more strategic in how we are ensuring, equitable growth as we address many of these things at the same time.
Yeah, that 35 corridor just keeps going. It just keeps going.
Yeah. But I think we can also think about, to your point about it's the housing piece, it's the early childhood education piece. One of the things I also want to do in that first 100 days is, these schools that have recently shuttered, how quickly might we be able to work with those stakeholders that are impacted and transition those, right, to a pre-K for SA or to a childcare. They're already obviously kind of configured for those, and there are needs in our community. So how might we do that? Is, I think, really, really important. I just sat down with the leader of Centro. So Centro here in San Antonio, they're the entity that is looking at the downtown, right? And kind of like what we want that to be. Right now, downtown is really focused on tourists. But how might we have that better balance between tourists and businesses and residents, right? And so it was interesting to look at some of the metrics that they've got. They would like the initial goal, I think they're going to update this, but right now there's only about 12,500 households that are down there. They want to increase that to 25,000, and if not higher. They want to make it so that 75% of the 75% of the storefront businesses down there are small businesses, right? They want to make it so that basic services are also within a 2-mile radius from where you're downtown. So all of these things speak to, again, us needing to be intentional about how we make these investments and think about them all at the same time. So that, again, San Antonio is a place that can be enjoyed by as many people as possible, not just a select few.
Gina, endorsements from organizations working to better their community are a really big deal. When they put a spotlight on you, they're saying that you are the best person to lead your city where folks are starting or growing their small business, like you're saying, raising a family, or just living their lives. Do you want to tell us about any groups who are endorsing you?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think one of the ones I'm most proud of is the endorsement of the American Federation of Teachers. It's a union that is specifically focused in the school district that raised me, right, Northside Independent School District. So they've got a great leader in Melina who's trying to be very proactive, understanding that Northside Independent School District here in San Antonio is the 4th largest school district in the state. Right. So it really matters who is leading and ensuring that the school district is serving as many kids well as possible in light of all the things that are impacting them. So I'm very proud to have the Northside Independent School District AFT endorsement. I'm also very proud to be endorsed by the Communication Workers of America. Right. These folks, it's a 1,300 person local union that ensures they're getting fair working conditions for their folks. One of the things that they're really focused on is an apprenticeship program, and it's those kinds of things. Look, so many kids in our community are maybe not just ready for community college, right? I mean, or maybe they will have tried it didn't work out. So you really need some other options, kind of like that medical training program that I mentioned, but also for young folks that want something a little bit more hands-on, but is going to put them on a path. I think those are great partnerships that as mayor, I would really focus on, because in the end, there's no right answer, right? There is just, the answer is economically strong families and communities, right? And now, whatever that looks like is where we've got to be focused. I'm also very proud to be endorsed by the American Federation of Government Employees, right? This is Military City USA. We would not be Military City USA without our government workers, our civil servants. And I'm proud myself, having been a civil servant, I'm proud to be endorsed by them because I know what they provide in our community. And I know, the fact that those folks are very talented, could be doing anything else in our community, but the fact that they choose to serve in our government, apolitical, and to be disrespected in the way that they are right now is unfortunate, but it's also unfortunate because people in our community are going to go unserved, right? So I'm very proud of those endorsements. I'm proud to be endorsed by Vote Vets. This is Military City USA. And so, I'll be honest with you, when I talk to my neighbors, we're not talking too much about some national security issues, but every now and then I will come across a veteran and we will both, unfortunately, discuss kind of just how dangerous these times have become because, again, we have a president who has, insulted our partners and allies, right? Has sided with Russia and with China, and we know what this means in the end, right? I mean, look, not to nerd out, but NATO Article 5. Article 5 is an attack on one, is an attack on all. The only time it has ever been employed is after 9/11. Right. So we said, hey, this is a time, Article 5. And you know what? Our partners and our allies showed up and they helped us. Russia ain't doing that. Russia is happy as spit to see us attacking it within, right? And unfortunately fracturing the alliance that has kept the world as safe as it possibly could be. Is it perfect? No. But I will tell you this, the world is less safer when America is not leading. And unfortunately, that's the path that we're headed on right now.
Gina, we're getting close to our time today, and I have a question that's not on my list, but I saw on your website right before we got on the call, and it just is so striking to me. You have pledged to have monthly town halls once you're elected, and at the same time that Republicans are telling their members, the National Republican Congressional Committee are telling the members, stop meeting with your constituents. I think that that's just a really marked contrast. And if you'd quickly tell us, why is accountability and talking to your constituents so important?
Yeah, look, I think what you do is how important is as important as how you do it, right? And so, like, really having a conversation, and not a Facebook Live, right? But like, no kidding, I'm going to be in front of you. We're going to look at each other in person. But, like, you know what I mean? And because this is too important. I mean, people want to, at the end of the day, people really want to be heard, right? They want to know that you get it. And sometimes there's nothing like showing up in somebody's community and seeing it for yourself, right? I mean, go out on, this is a perfect example, actually. I was just on we went to a town hall, actually, Tatum, you might know, a town hall with Tommy Calvert, the commissioner, and he was having a community discussion of about what was going to happen to the Frost Center now if the Spurs went downtown. Because, again, people are looking around their neighborhood and saying, hey, where's all that East Side development that was supposed to come that never came, right? So now what? And it was such an interesting, it was interesting for me to watch the ways in which people were talking past each other. And did not have a common understanding of what the challenge was, right? Because you had somebody go up there. They called it the cone problem. Tommy Calvert was speaking about it. He's like, you've got these cones, and what do you have cones? They get people quickly in and out of the area, right? And so people, as a result of the cones, small businesses in that area, people are not able to get to them on game day, and they're not able to stay after the event, right? Because, again, those cones are really designed to get people in and get people out. And the cop, the individual, the security officer, law enforcement officer from Bexar County, he said, yeah, but when we do that, we're able to get people, in and out of there in like 45 minutes after the end of at the end of the event. And Tommy Calvert said, that sounds like a solution for the north side. Right? Like, that's not what we're talking about. It's not about getting in and out of fast. We want you to invest in our community, hang out with us, spend money in our community. And so I think really what a leader does is they at least help frame the problem and the opportunity in a common way for everybody. And that was 20 years that thing has been there. And they were just now kind of like level setting on what the challenge was. I mean, it really speaks to why leadership is so important, why we've got to ask these questions, how we, have to understand what it looks like in a community, and be committed to addressing those. And so that's why I think part of it is literally just showing up in communities and hearing from them. So yes, I look forward to that town hall every month, and it'll, one day District 2, one day District 5, one day District 6, right? I think you got to go all throughout the city in light of the challenges being what they, and the opportunities being what they are, on top of, right, kind of monthly updates on how well we're doing on this 100-day plan. It's important, I think, that people are brought into the conversation. I look forward to doing that.
And one last question, then we'll give you a talking break. Where can people find you online, and when is the first day of early voting?
Yes. So the first day of early voting is April 22nd, right? Early voting is just 1 week, right? So it starts on the 22nd, ends on the 29th, and then the election is on May 3rd. And it's really important because, as Tatum knows, the election is during Fiesta, right? So we are really encouraging folks to vote early, right? You can go to GinaOrtizJones.com, sign up for a shift, or stop by the office. We're at 2104 McCullough, right? Stop by the office, pick up a yard sign, pick up a shirt. Let's, help us knock on some of these doors, because again, this is too important for anybody to sit out. Again, we are talking about the direction of our city for the next 4 years. So I'd be honored to have people support. GinaOrtizJones.com, though, is where folks can go and learn more.
Gina, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time, and we're really glad to have you back on the pod.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Take care.
To those of you listening from San Antonio, we're coming your way later this spring. Join us on Tuesday, May 6th at 5 p.m. for a great chance to gather with like-minded progressives, visit with candidates, office holders, and activists, grab a beverage, share stories, and celebrate progress in Texas, which doesn't happen without you. During our live happy hour podcast recording, come meet the people doing this good work to push progress forward in Texas. You can sponsor the event and this podcast when you RSVP early at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you there. And for our statewide audience, thank you. You're already supporting our mission by following our pods, and we invite you to take your activism one step further. Help us keep doing what we're doing when you become a regular monthly contributor at progresstexas.org/donate. Small, regular donations add up significantly for us, and no amount is too small. Thank you to Krista Varney, Heather Hernandez-Yincho, and Morgan Daniels for joining our small but mighty team lately. We just can't do it without you. Thanks again for the support, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye, y'all.